Welcome to the Aspire Technology Partners TechCast, a technology trends webinar series. This series is brought to you by Cisco. Aspire Technology Partners is a Cisco Gold certified partner with Cisco Master Specializations in collaboration, security, cloud, and managed services. I'm your host, Josh Dole. There we go. Excellent. So, today's Aspire TechCast, the new normal and beyond. Thank you for joining us. Today's team. First things first, my co-moderator, Mr. Jared Heiner, Education and Innovation Director here at Aspire. Jared, welcome. How are you?
I am wonderful, and I love that you found a picture of me that looks somewhat like an action shot as opposed to a headshot. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, for that.
I think I actually took that when you were giving a presentation, so I might have actually been there in the room with you. So I consider that a treasured photo. So we have Jared. We have Mr. Talou Malik, who you may recognize from one of our casts about 2 weeks ago. Hello, Talou. Good morning.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me again.
Mr. Rob Costanza, our Security Practice Director. Welcome, Rob.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting me back, Josh.
Super happy to have you here. Mr. Chandler Bassett, our Engineering Director here in Boston. Hi, Chandler.
I can't believe you wanted me to do this again.
We also, of course, have Mr. Brian Shalacy representing Rome, New York, our IoT lead. Mr. Shalacy, good morning.
Good morning, Josh. Thanks for having me back.
Hey, the guy with the best background today. Look at this. I feel like we should probably dig into some of the technology there. And last but not least, you got yours truly here. So playing moderator and co-host with Jared. I'll also maybe represent some of the collaboration technologies. So we're not going to use slides in this presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing because this is really, truly built to be a discussion amongst technologists and folks focused on the business of technology here at Aspire. So we do have some prepared questions, I think. I had arranged somebody to hand them to me off camera, but that's not going to happen because he's 17 months old and is unable to actually comply with that request. So, Jared, would you like to start with the first question?
I would, and in fact, I was going to have someone hand me the questions in individual envelopes so I could open them up and read them as if we're at an award show. But in light of the fact that I ran out of envelopes because everything I do is now on email, I'm just going to pretend. But no, and thank you everyone for joining, and thank you for all of you for participating, and Josh for leading this TechCast series. So here we are in what is obviously one of the, it's a historical marker that we're living through right now. And we know that organizations have changed dramatically, and the challenges have been unprecedented. And so in the spirit of that, here we are having this conversation because we don't want to focus on just one piece of technology. We don't want to focus on one or two. They're not silos. All of these different pieces of technology come together to help us be successful and to help our organizations work smoothly. So in that vein, my first question is, since this pandemic has been here and we've been out of work, the challenges to organizations are huge. And we have these remote workforces. What are the greatest challenges that we are seeing because of the virtual and remote workforces? And in the spirit of just really picking on someone, Chandler, I'm going to go right to you because you have the coolest audio video setup. So we have to ask you the challenges that are coming down. How are businesses really being impacted by the virtual and remote situation from your perspective?
Yikes. Yeah, I think primarily some of the mistakes that people have made is they've tried to take their business as usual, their normative operations, and apply that outside of their four walls without understanding not necessarily the risks, but the challenges to operate that way have dramatically shifted. I think there's a lot of things, certainly a lot of organizations and infrastructures that were set up to make people feel really, really cozy about being around brick and mortar establishments. They could either with an iron fist or certainly with a process and a policy that is enumerated in an employee handbook somewhere that gave them a lot of confidence with what was going on. I think it's not only a technical challenge, and I spoke about operational challenge, but it it hangs its hat on trust. If you've got a workforce that you trust and you're enabling to do the right thing without anybody sitting over their back and ensuring it's getting done, then I think you are far more ready for this than others were. But the long and the short of it is there were still a lot of people that were incredibly caught off guard by this. I think this also accelerated a lot of architectural setup and certainly forward thinking to, again, well, how do I enable this for the future, right? We talk all the time. There's no really going back, right? I don't necessarily think when all of this settles down and we social distance in offices and then people feel comfortable shaking hands again, that we're all going to just sardine can inside of an office and make it happen. I think the productivity that some organizations are realizing, and certainly the productivity that some aren't, are really, really driving some more dramatic shifts into maybe we can take what we thought couldn't be remote and make it fully remote in cases. Not only does that open you up to operational efficiencies, but now your talent pool has gone from your zip code or your area code to wherever people have power and internet.
Well, it's fascinating you said it, because we've really ripped the curtain away from tradition, right? And everybody hinges on tradition. And you said something really important, is that this accelerated infrastructure in huge ways. And so I'm going to toss the ball right into your basement, Brian, because that's where you are, if memory serves me. Talk to me about the changes in infrastructure. You're an engineer, you're an IoT guy. That big push, what happened?
Sure. So, working in IoT, a lot of my customers are public sector customers. And, the biggest change, or the biggest, thing that I saw unfold was the amount of folks without broadband access, especially in, in cities, in K-12, and there's a rush to get them connectivity to be able to do, remote work or remote learning. I've also seen really, traditionally we've seen remote workers be the people critical to keeping the infrastructure running. So IT is a good example. They've always had for years access to resources within the buildings that they support. Now it's changed to everyone from a secretary, up to the different departments within a city. So the shift to move to get those workers connected remotely, once they have access, that's been a very large shift. So we're working with cities right now and schools to provide students with broadband access through cellular, or if a city has a Wi-Fi deployment underway, redeploying access points in those areas hardest hit without with students without broadband access.
So,
And
Brian,
go ahead, Josh.
well, that's very interesting. So taking that concept of the infrastructure that again, a municipality or a school offers up and truly extending it far beyond the boundaries in order to support the students and teachers, anybody who doesnn't have good access, who's now stuck at home. That's a very interesting flip. To Lou, I think you've looked a little bit at our managed services capabilities. I would ask, what your thoughts are on this flip as well, right? Because I think that ties in with some of, the remote IT professional concept and working to support folks who are, freshly, completely remote. Do you have comments on that?
Yeah, sure. So, in addition to Chandler and Brian's points, which I completely agree with, I think we also saw an uptick, not only for remote users, but for them to be able to access corporate networks securely, right? So from a VPN connectivity standpoint, a lot of customers realized overnight they didn't have enough licenses. So we got a lot of requests to help them turn those up so that their users could access their environment securely, right? The other one, of course, which everybody's quite familiar with, is remote meetings and video capabilities like the meeting we're having right now. Once again, that underlying theme of security is always constant now that, everybody's working remotely and they're not on the corporate network. So we had a lot of requests around how do we do this? How do we do this quickly? How do we do this securely? And I think that was where our managed service team came into play to support customers, right? Because, from the get-go, the way we position our managed service team is to be an extension of the internal IT team of the customer, right? So in light of this unprecedented, unpredictable event, our guys were really able to step in and alleviate some of the burden on the internal IT, help them get VPN turned up. We had a customer success team help customers get trained up on WebEx and how to set up a remote meeting and set up your video and things of that nature, right? So we were able to really help customers overnight to change their workflow. Now, from an internal perspective with Aspire, close to 50% of our managed service analysts are remote anyway. Prior to the crisis, they've always been remote. You know, I think that helped us be able to recruit people from outside of our geography if we found good talent, right? And, you know, they would have multi-factor authentication and VPN connectivity in different time zones, because our managed service shop is a 24/7 shop. So, you know, those things lent themselves useful to be able to support customers 24/7. You know, in this situation, it was almost business as usual for Aspire, but that's because of the nature of the business we're in, right? We understand not every customer is necessarily going to be able to adapt in such a quick fashion. So that's sort of what I saw from an Aspire perspective and with some of my customers.
You know, what I'm sensing is that, and Brian, you kind of touched on this off of what Chandler was saying, we exploded into this remote workforce situation. And the easiest thing to do at the time was to say, you know what, take a device, go. You hit the nail on the head, though, but you don't have connectivity. Oops. You know, and Robert, I'll throw you a softball. Well, what about security? And then Josh, what about the ability to connect? And now we're going, well, how do we get everybody together in a space? And when you're asking those questions, there's got to be a mesh that pulls it all together. And Chalu, that's the point with managed services, to start looking at these things, because obviously you can patchwork quilt this thing together, but is it really going to continue to drive your strategic goals? So to that point that Brian made, you're out there, oops, no connectivity, but everyone's got a device. Robert, what happens next?
That's a great question, right? And as we were just kind of, as I was listening to everyone, you know, one of the things that came into mind was we've always worked remote, right? So one of the challenges that organizations are facing, and what do we do next, are how do we get our users, right, and employees, staff, students, whatever that may be, to the data that they need, right? So the one thing that comes to mind that was a problem before, and I think has been exacerbated, is really the communication plans. Right? What we've always tried to do in security, obviously we talk a lot about technical capabilities and tools in order to reach outcomes, but yeah, one of the biggest challenges, and a lot of people have heard this, it's people, process, technology, right? So people, process make up a big portion of what's next. And I'll start here. You know, what's next? I think the communication plans really have to change. And what I mean is, from a business initiative, whether you're a school district, whether you're higher ed, whether you're commercial, financial, it's really wrapping around what you're going to do, what you're not going to do, and helping the organization get behind that. As we learned some technologies, we're dealing with business continuity plans that were prepared for our organizations, right? And we went through those concepts of a DR site, a redundant DR site, or maybe move to cloud. And we were intentional with that conversation. We brought in the right stakeholders. And now that we've worked from home now, or we are working from home, when the dust settles, what happens? And I'll end on this, right? We're starting to hear, you know, 5% of workforce, they're analyzing, saying, hey, this isn't a critical role that has to be in an office. So we're starting to see businesses analyze, you know, users' role, how they need to interact with the organization, and maybe moving them home. But these security challenges are still going to continue to be there, that we just discussed earlier.
And as they move, and everyone's going remote, a lot has changed. And I think, to your point, the practice and the tools, we have to get comfortable with those. And Josh, my question to you from the collaboration perspective is that becomes really the backbone, right? How you set all of your collaboration, because that's how you're meeting with clients, that's how you're meeting with students, that's how you're meeting even internally. What mistakes, I don't want to say mistakes were made, but the challenges to that. Because the first thing we heard was, I ran out and I found this great application. Well, everybody just grabbed. It was just a grab, a land grab for what were, challenges from a collaboration standpoint?
So, so first I would say organizationally, right, not having the right tool. So not having sort of put the forethought into having a tool that frankly provides video. I think that all of us, so as we've adapted, we've seen our internal video use skyrocket, and you're seeing it in the news every day, whether it's online learning, right, a lot of articles, right, because a lot of us as parents are, how do I get the daycare kids to meet, or how do we, get the kids to keep doing their schoolwork, whatever it is. Everybody's using video, right? So a lot of organizations hadn't invested the time in getting a tool that was suitable for business video. Now, Cisco and WebEx, you're seeing more in the press. That's typically kind of I would say, an unsung hero of the Cisco portfolio. WebEx is the, as I said, most secure, global, and available video network that is in production today. So organizations are starting to recognize, hey, wait, I need something that isn't leveraging a Facebook SDK or that is open or prone to hacking attacks or other sort of unwanted visitors. So I would say first, from an organizational level, it's the tool, right? Then I would say it comes down to kind of a culture and human piece where I'd say one big challenge was a lot of us didn't have enough nice background pictures in our home offices. And I would point out to Lou as a great example, right? On our call a few weeks ago, he mentioned, hey, look, I went out and I got these, and again, he's got these nice flowers that hang there, and it really adds a lot to his video persona. Myself, you can see here, hey, I'm not winning this game right now, but you've developed a couple of more pictures. Chandler, I mean, everybody else on the call has got a fantastic background. So I think we're starting to see people get to the point where some of us were 5 or 7 or 10 years ago doing a lot of video, in that they say, wait, if I've got to work like this, I'm going to play with it a little bit, right? I'm going to turn it into a piece of my personality. I'm going to make it an aspect or a component. And that was a challenge before, because a lot of people said, oh, no, this is how I'll be on my video calls. I'll turn my camera off. And so what I love about this is it has been an opportunity to get people over the hump, and I really don't think that people go back. I think that in the future, right, in the next 6 months, 10 months, whatever it is, even those of us who say, look, I'm going to work from home that 1 or 2 days a week, not going fully remote, we're going to expect that we're going to be on camera, because now we're used to it. You've seen me in my sweatshirt, or, I am not wearing running shorts right now, but I could be. I think that that's something that was a challenge that has become an opportunity. We're moving forward pretty gracefully from that, from a collab perspective.
So it almost sounds like, again, this serves as an opportunity. If I'm leading an organization, I say, wait a second, this is like one big tabletop exercise. And I need to be able to step back and go, what's actually working well? And where are the gaps? And so from a business continuity perspective, right, we always talk about how IT is supposed to be in the background. You're not supposed to know that it's there. Well, guess what? That engine died, and all of a sudden it was at the forefront. So I'm going to return back to you, Chandler, and say business continuity from your perspective. If you're sitting at that tabletop exercise with the CEO or the manager, whoever it is, where are you going with this? What are you going to say to them?
So I think one of the things that people may or may not know, Netflix, the organization and the application, they have a process called the monkey. And it is an opportunity that they unleash on their production network during peak hours where things just break. And there's a team internal to Netflix that designs, codes, implements this monkey to really throw the engineers and the architects on their back heels. And it's a train like you fight type thing. I think what I would do in that scenario is be the monkey. Everybody had business continuity plans, never thinking they wouldn't be able to get into the office. I'm a huge fan of the show The Office, and if you remember when they were stuck in the room and everybody went to New York to have a good time, Pam said, "Hey, Dwight, give me a key." And he said, "No, I'm going to keep both of them, because if I'm not around, you're all probably dead." It's that lack of business continuity planning, or at least foresight into it, because it's right in front of you. Everybody wants to enable the app, the data, whatever. But in doing so, you have to think and really divorce yourself from normative thinking. If I can't get into the door, what do we do? Right? If the building blows up, right? We have some level of data center availability today in a normative business strategy that revolves around active, passive. Maybe it's tape back up to Iron Mountain. Maybe there's an offsite replication center, we have RTO, RPO, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, that all assumes that there's some level of normalcy, or at least experienced normalcy. Whereas this situation that we're in now, no one could have called it, no one could have planned it. I think the people who are thriving and really executing on that, on what it is, have really kind of divorced themselves and introduced that monkey Netflix, like, hey, we're gonna think all up and down the stack. So it's no longer just while it's enabled by tech to execute your business continuity plans, you have to think outside of the technology as well.
Can I jump in, Jay?
Chandler, I was thinking, by the way, when you said monkey on Netflix, I was thinking that maybe it was like the next version of the Tiger King. I got very excited.
I was hoping for that too. I was hoping for that. Hey, I think Rob could stand. Rob, do you want to angle in on that from a security perspective?
I do a little bit, right? You know, it's an interesting one when we look at business continuity plans, right? I feel like we've taken it and we said we didn't know this was going to happen. And although this event is true, there's always been something to say, right? What does business continuity consist of? My environment is not going to be accessible or readily available. I need to come up with a secondary way to get there, right? So whether it's a pandemic, whether it's what happens if the power goes out, right? What happens if we lose grid, right? That's another event that organizations prepare for. How will your business continue to function? Will it? Can it? Right? What if one of your internet goes down? Right? So preparing for just the inevitable, and it becomes a risk factor, right? So to Chandler's point, right, it becomes risk. You as an organization have to say, although I don't know when the pandemic's going to end. I don't know if we're going to go back. I just know that this progressive movement of using technology in the workforce has always been here, right? And we've always added on top of, and I think what we're starting to see as business continuity plans is really focusing. We hear a lot around micro segmentation. I'll talk a lot around micro features, right? Because I really think we're starting to focus on not the 50 things that a tool can offer, right? But what are the 7 things that we need to make an organization run? Let's invest in that. Let's move there, and let's talk and communicate about, if this happens, we're at least prepared. You're never going to be 100%. You're never going to get back up and running in a flip of a switch. But the automation that Chandler talks about is certainly there. The tools are there to say, if you detect this piece of malware, shut this down. If we detect the server going down or getting hit, right? There's tools out there to say, you know what, build another server. Let's get the resources available to our customers. So just to end there, I think that we've always thought about business continuity plans. Because of what this is it's making it more difficult for us to see what's right in front of us, because the answers are right there.
It's a great point.
Brian, you want to weigh in on that, or Tolu?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just piggyback on what everyone said. To me, I mean, business continuity plan is key. Technology comes second, right? You need that plan in place. You could have the greatest technology in the world, but if you don't have the plan to back it up, it's probably going to fail, right? So, a lot of things that, the time I spent as a consultant doing security projects, when working with the business continuity plan, it was always around, if there's a fire in my building, or a flood or something like that. But nobody ever really counted on a pandemic. It was always to get to a secondary site. So I think you're going to find organizations going to add remote work policies or plans into their business continuity plan. That's going to be included. I also think supply chain, right? If you look at some of our customers that are affected by this, that do need technology and don't have it on hand, they've been affected by the supply chain from the manufacturers because of the coronavirus. So I think you'll see that added as part of the business continuity planning as well.
Yeah,
So-
I completely agree. I mean, the interesting thing about this particular situation, like Brian mentioned and Chandler mentioned, nobody could have predicted this, right? Regardless of whether or not you had a secondary site to help against disasters and things like that, this wasn't something anybody thought of, right? And what makes the situation even more challenging is we don't necessarily know when we're out of this current state. And even if we do get out of this current state, nobody hopes for this, nobody prays for this, but what happens if we have to revisit this date at a future date, right? How are we planning for that, right? If something like that was to happen again, it's not going to be a total surprise anymore, right? So these are some of the questions that organizations need to start asking is how are we planning for this if it was to happen again? Can we afford to be closed down or out of business twice in the same year? If the answer to that is no, then we really got to start taking a hard look at some of these questions and figure out how we start to build the infrastructure to be able to support the capacity requirements for remote users from an applications perspective, from a security perspective, from a data governance perspective, because data governance doesn't go away just because everybody's working remotely now, right? So these are some of the things that I think organizations need to start looking at.
I just want to follow up on that, Tulu, because it's not just having these things in place, but it's also helping our staff. And again, I come from an education background, and you see this in education, whether it's K-12 or higher ed. All right, go home and do what you do from home. And the brakes got slammed on because people go, I've never used this tool before. And then the mistake was, well, we've got a schedule that we follow. I'm just going to do that on video. It doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. So when we start looking at, how we can support ourselves, it's not enough just to have got a plan in place. People have to be able to enact that plan and understand how those tools work. And then all of a sudden you see productivity dropping for a week. A buddy of mine works for an insurance company. It's a global insurance company. And for a week, he sat there with his computer and they didn't know how to get this thing up and running. And for that week, productivity for the company just went right down. So if people process, Robert, to your point, technology, I think you have to look at all those and again, make sure that people are practicing these things, that they know where to go to get support. You cannot just throw people out there and say, do what you do. It doesn't translate.
When we talk about efficiency in the business, right, whether it's fiscal responsibility, right, trying to, or get process, like what I talk a lot about, and we as Aspire, we're super efficient, right? And what we try to do for our customers is find the least path to resistance, right? And I think that's what this adds, is really when you put process into place, we're preparing for as much as we can, right? And it's take control of the things you can control and just let the things that are out of your control be what they are. But to not feel helpless. And I think that's what many organizations feel. And in a sense, you are helpless because there's state and federal mandates going on. But at the same time, there are businesses going on, and some businesses are still moving forward. And my wife's an education teacher as well. And to Jared's point, it's severely disrupted, right? The education, but the tools are there, right? And that's what excites me of kind of the next, wherever we go, whether it's back, whether it's forward. I think we're starting to see that the technology can be used in a better fashion. We can secure it, right? And we can develop better processes around how everyone utilizes these technologies now to improve the efficiency of the organization.
So you bring up an excellent point. The tools are there. So Mr. Josh Dolby, when people go back to the office, what next, right? We've talked about this business continuity piece. We talked about starting to look at things a little differently. We've got these tools in place. Biggest mistake in my mind is we just go, oh, thank God that's over. Because Tulu, you already said it. This could be knocking on our door again. So Josh, from your perspective, collaboration is more than just the tools. It's the practice. Help me out.
So I think part of this can't be divorced from that sort of business continuity, business availability planning, right? So I think that something that organizations have to do, and I'm talking to organizations that are doing some of this now. First off, they're reforecasting financially what their outlook looks like for the rest of the year, right? But then the folks in various leadership positions are also starting to do, and I'm just going to call it sort of a wargaming exercise, if you will, in order to think around the corner of what Tulu mentioned, where, look, if we do say, hey, whether it's everybody can go back, let's say in 3 weeks or whatever it is, everybody can go back, or if it's 50% of people can go back, understanding that at any given moment we have to pull that lever and pull people back. So doing planning around how that would work, right? Which collaboration involves communication. So having an effective communication strategy for the entire corporate or school population to say, game on, right? You could all go back, or some percentage of people can go back. And then how do we move those populations back and forth? As well, the idea of having different almost shifts or teams to say, look, you're part of the green team, and the green team can work on site this week. And then the blue team can work on site next week. And then the yellow team can work from your schooling days, Jared, where I'm sure you presided over this kind of schedule, right? Where we have those days and students know which classes they go to based on the color of the day. I'm seeing some of my customers plan that way, and then also work to look inside of the organization and understand who their most at-risk folks are. So who are the folks who have had significant illnesses, or who fit certain brackets where they say, look, this is somebody again with an upper respiratory an ongoing issue. That person, we're going to work to support that person as a fully remote individual, and that might mean making sure that person has this device, which I have a DX80 in front of me now. If they're lucky, they get a Desk Pro. It's really cool. But make sure that that person feels fully empowered to continue to participate in their work from home where they're safest, and then making sure we have a good integration plan. And as we do, those of us who are fortunate enough to be able to step into the office, we have to be able to go in and meet and work and conduct ourselves in such a way that no longer, and I used to make a joke about this, that the folks at home were sitting at the kids' table, right? Because people in the conference room are like, oh, we're having the meeting, haha, there's a remote person, we forgot about him or her. No more. That's not cool. That's not happening anymore. That person is not a joiner. It used to be that, oh, well, that person couldn't make it, so they're not a joiner. That's not the reason. That person is an important and valued member of our team, and we've got to make sure to try to make eye contact and bring that person in and truly collaborate. So while we may think, oh, well, everybody goes back to the office, we stop using video as much. I don't think that's the case. I think we bring the video experience back with us. And again, a lot of those folks that didn't use it before see it as a tool for empowerment for the entire organization, and especially our colleagues, our friends, our coworkers, those who are most at risk of this terrible disease. That's just one thing.
You plan on? No, I appreciate that, Josh, and I think your insight there is that we cannot abandon some of these things. Just like Toulou's going to have to find a matching set of flowers to go in his office, to kind of bring that experience. But Toulou, to put you back on the spot again, you have the ability to work in office, you have the ability to work at home. What do you think we go back to the office? If you're not used to working remote, you come back. What things do you want to be able to capture? What's your sense from working with your customers?
I think to Josh's point, one thing I realized through this whole process was both on a professional level as well as on a personal level, to Josh's point, just leveraging more video. I mean, I think I mentioned on the last call, both my parents, they live in Nigeria. These days, when I want to speak to them, I don't just call them anymore. I do a video call with them because I want to see them. I want them to see me. I want them to know I'm okay. I want to see that they're okay. And same thing with customers. Most of my customers now, they were a little bit hesitant to leveraging video in the past. Now everybody wants to be on video. Everybody's looking for an opportunity to connect. Everybody, wants to see that the other person is doing well. So I think pulling that into our workflow, I see that happening. And just because of the unpredictability of what the next 6, 7, 8 months may bring, I think it's more crucial to just get used to working this way and get used to, being able to adapt to, hey, if I got to be remote, I have my background set up with my beautiful flowers or your pictures, and I can jump on video at the drop of a dime and get things done, right? So it's a little bit challenging in that you can't really predict what's going to happen. I also envision when we do go back, we probably maintain the social distancing policies for some time before everybody gets really comfortable shaking hands and doing all those things again, right? So it'll be interesting to see how everything shapes out.
And I appreciate that. And your point about reaching out to, your parents is really important, because look at the situation with nursing homes. You can't even go in and see loved ones, and we hear this constantly about how, somebody passed away and I didn't have access to see that loved one. We've got to start making some of those shifts. And I'd also like to think, Rob, Chandler, a better understanding of security and what that means, and then access to data, right? That's shifted from remote workers now are looking at all these things much differently, correct?
So there's one thing that scares me is privacy concerns, right? As great as the technology is as we work home, the one thing that does reign in my mind that we talk through is privacy, as we have all, Brian, right? We have all these IoT devices in our house, non-corporate, personal, Alexas, Siris, Googles, of that nature. They're all listening, right? And we have our personal devices. So as we're conducting business in our homes, what's listening, who's listening, personal information. That's one of the things that I think about. And again, no answer right here today, but communication, there's ways to solve it through technology, through people, through processes. It's all there. There's frameworks written out, right? NIST has tons of publications, right, around privacy controls, how to secure your organization, whether you're federal, whether you're higher ed. So, focusing on things of that nature, even though I talk a scary piece, there's, again, hope at the tunnel, because stuff's out there for us.
Yeah, I think similar to that mindset, there's a large population, irrespective of political leanings, that feel like maybe we're sitting in an overreactive state. Maybe this, again, I'm not going to super derail this conversation, but I think that just further emboldens Robert's point. You got to be a little bit paranoid to do security correctly. I think gone are the days, I used to joke and say, if you can do your job, security is not doing theirs. I think we're past that a little bit, but it's certainly, you need to carry a healthy level of paranoia, talking back to the business continuity discussions, and you have to assume and approach things from a different perspective to really ensure that your strategy, more importantly, your policy, is being enforced where it needs to be enforced, and you can audit it correctly, right? If I just throw a device out and that's my strategy, I'm very unfortunate. I feel unfortunate for you. Please call us as soon as this thing is over. Let's talk about that, because the firewall is not a security strategy. But being able to enforce and audit a healthy level of paranoia policy will ensure that you've got a better than average shot of not ending up on the front page for bad reasons. And that extends through your collaboration strategy, what you do and do not enable within these wonderful applications that Josh very clearly enjoys, but also your data access policies, what you choose to do with availability from a policy and from an enforcement perspective, and then what you as an organization are willing to absorb from risk, because everything is a little bit cloudy, no pun intended. What you do want to do, what you can do, and then really what it's going to take to enable that forward-thinking business growth initiative, right? Like, very few organizations that we work with and continue to work with are super stoked to have flat growth year over year. I don't necessarily think world domination is on their side, but they absolutely want to espouse their benefits to their customer and client base, and to grow their offerings, and to really supplant themselves as a leader in whatever industry they're in. And they're going to do it with technology, and they're going to do it with us, because we have that perspective and we can tell that story better than anybody else. But there's got to be a little bit of healthy level of paranoia.
Yeah, I think too, when we return back to work, there's going to be an addition to public safety. So not just door access control and cameras for video surveillance. I think you're going to see an addition of thermal imaging, for instance, right? And being able to take somebody's temperature as they walk through the door, and then having a policy in place to, it's not going to happen overnight, but I think there's going to be a sort of a shift to that, as well as some automation technology, sort of a hands-off approach to things that are typically done day to day, where we share contact on different surfaces. So when I walk into a bathroom and I use the soap dispenser, or I use the faucet, you're going to see a lot of those devices now become online and be automated And the process to replenish those devices will be automated as well to keep the actual physical contact to a minimum.
Okay, are you proposing IoT bathrooms? Is that what that was?
We already have a solution for it. So
You don't have an IoT bathroom today?
Yeah, we could actually show that in our lab. We have some pretty cool devices in our lab where automated soap dispensers that are online, paper towel, toilet paper, and it'll automatically order and send it to the site. And yeah,
we should make sure that it can check Amazon for supply and delivery date and so forth. So maybe 3 months ahead of time, it's ordering the appropriate amount of toilet paper. Let me ask one other sort of business question. And again, I think that you three gents who just sort of spoke would answer this. Do you think that up until and even let's just say before this quarantine lockdown situation, were organizations budgeting enough for security and securing their operations?
No.
I can take that one. Yeah, absolutely not. Right. There are reports well under 2% of budgets were spent on security. We think industry average is anywhere between 5 and 7%. And when you look at all the technologies that have, really have a touch in security, right? It's other budget, whether it's school safety security, right? A security officer. It's all wrapped around data, right? Whether it's you have the supervisors for a particular department, right? Whether it's a school building, like all of these have individual budgets, and that's why I talk a lot about communication. We all have to come together to collectively share that responsibility. And I think we're going to start to see that more. I think everyone's seeing security as a big pain point, really being exacerbated through this problem. And my hope is that budgets do go up, through this, and that's a relative term, of course, because it's not my budget, but.
So do you think that at the highest level in an organization so obviously if they're not allocating the appropriate budget for security, it sounds to me like partly what you're telling me here is most organizations just frankly don't understand security. Is that an accurate?
I think that's the challenge. Yeah, I think that's the challenge, right? You just don't know what you don't know, right? And that's an oxymoron statement, but and I think that's what makes Aspire, our expertise here, right? A lot of questions always asked, what makes Aspire? We're just, a few people who just have tons of experience in our particular domain who are coming together to collectively share our roles and expertise in particular domains to further, our customers' needs, right? So that's really what, separates us. I think because we have the people behind us who have all the experience, we can add a lot of insight. And all we're trying to do, right, is help the organization make the right decision for them. We have best practice guidance, we have experience, we can tell you, hey, most of organizations in your industry typically go this route and we see it successful or we don't. And here's our take on why. But at the end of the day, it's the organization that has to, it's their money, it's their budget, it's their people. They're the ones, we guide them, but it's their budget that's really going to determine how long it takes them to secure, whether that's a short-term or long-term. But it's a process and it's continuous. It's not something that we stop, right? It's continually measured. It's a baseline, refreshed, analyzed, and it's a continuous cycle. And that's what.
And tested, right? I mean, and tested to Jared's point or to Josh's point earlier about the red team, blue team. Right. Once that plan is in place and the processes are in place, testing that throughout the year so it doesn't become stale and is refreshed.
I think security as an architecture, maybe as a business enabler or disabler, again, to my joke previous, there's very few people from an industry perspective supporting businesses through a security lens that have an opportunity to talk about it without it being a sky is falling conversation. I think the reason why collaboration becomes so systemic within an organization from a foothold perspective, because it quite literally enables the business. We are speaking with our customer base from a partner, from a direct customer base perspective right now, like on this call. I know there's people out there. It's tough to do with security, and it's tough to sound like Chicken Little or not sound like Chicken Little all the time. And I think the organizations that get that, right, and are doing a really good job of understanding what security does and doesn't do, and again, to my point previous, that have a cohesive policy that is enforceable auditable from a red team, blue team. If you want to get a little silly, we'll call purple teaming, whatever the hell that is. It's not a real thing. That's a different conversation. I think those are the people that really truly get it, right? It's not it's just, there are some businesses, there are some people who operate those lines of businesses. There are some presidents and CEOs that understand that, and then there are others that feel really uncomfortable because of their lack of awareness. And when people don't know something, they're afraid of it. When they're afraid of it, that's the thing, right? And I think that's where Robert and his team do a really good job of breaking down those stigmas and making it far more approachable so it can be business impacting and impactful in a positive way.
Well, Chandler, would you agree that, and Robert, you made this comment before, analytics, it's really what the driving force is, because it sounds like the sky is falling if you go through all these scenarios and all the products, et cetera, but to be able to have products that provide analytics, because then you're going back and talking about it almost from a scientific perspective as opposed to pandemic perspective. And I guess what I mean by that is, Robert, when you're doing these, having these conversations, looking at what the tools can turn out and what it can show, like how much spam we got, how many times are we getting, bad actors coming in, that drives someone writing a check, correct?
That is correct, right? And this is the $1 million statement. Everyone on this call, everyone in here, you're only as good as the information you have, right? When someone provides you data, right, you make decisions off that. And the data you have at the time is going to either, sway you one way or another to move, to either solve or react, whatever it is. So to Jared's point, data is everything, right? The analytics are so key to see what is happening, not to react, right? I don't want to get too technical. We'll talk about the kill chain and where things fit inside a piece of security, and I won't go down that rabbit hole, but what we try to do is when you get that analytics and data is try to move it further from reactionary to the recon phase, which is I want to stop someone from understanding my data and taking, using and understanding who Jared works with, right, to then infiltrate or use that social engineering. It really is what I'm trying to get to get to someone else. And we're seeing that with COVID-19, right? So, people preying on everyone, all it takes is one. So having that data really is super important. And that's at the end of the day, when we're talking security, that's all people want. They want your data, right? So we get caught up with endpoints and I need this here, I need this there. Where's your data? Who has access to it? And let's find ways to secure it, because that's what people want.
Yeah. So we're coming up to the end. We have just enough time. I'm going to throw one more question out, which gives each of you just under 60 seconds. If you pass that, I will have to dump you. And we won't even know what the conclusion of your answer was. But you each get about a minute. But out of this, right, there's been some IT leaders that have done some amazing things. And I want to know what those are, because, again, sharing is caring. Let's get together, that professional learning community. Brian, hit me with something that you say, man, I saw this, I was blown away. This was a great idea, concept, purchase, procurement, whatever it is. What was it?
I had two. I'll spend 30 seconds on each. So two customers, one I was involved with. So City of Schenectady, been on the project for a long time, a lot of smart city initiatives there. They were ahead of this with the public Wi-Fi deployment, getting their police department on board. They realized the need for the police department to be able to do briefings remotely to other buildings in the city and to quickly react and respond. So they have public Wi-Fi, they have Collab now deployed, and they did it very, very quickly. And now they're helping the school. So that's number one. Number two is another customer of ours that I didn't work with, another team did, but really quickly stood up a COVID response. It was a hospital, the ability for people who are infected with COVID to join the waiting room, meet with a doctor remotely. I thought that was tremendous and was pulled off in a very short period of time. So those were two that just come top of mind that I thought were great.
Thank you. You were over by only 5 seconds, so 5 push-ups go. Robert, help me out. What have you seen as takeaways that are worth sharing?
I'll be honest. I've watched community. So this isn't a technical one or a security one. I've just watched communities come together. I've really watched people help out companies. Our company, other companies, other vendors really step up, and whatever technology you're using, right, to provide free licenses just to help those businesses scale, right? WebEx was offering, Cisco offering, free tools to help scale, right? If you need, and tons of other partners. So what's been encouraging to me is to see the collaboration amongst other partners, but really see the collaboration tools that Josh talked about, as well as really security being a part of every conversation. Not just, I need this tool, but how do I secure it? That's a conversation I typically never followed or always came after. It's like, we'll secure it later, we'll deal with it then. And of course, it never happened. So that's me.
Yeah, no, great point. Excellent point. Tolu, something an IT director did that just blew your mind, said this is something, again, we got to get out.
So I have a customer who their CIO and president is a higher ed institution. Throughout this whole pandemic, they decided they weren't going to stop operations. They were going to host their commencement ceremony coming up in a month. They were going to do it remotely. And they understood that this was going to be challenging. This has probably never been done before, but they were willing to take on the challenge, and we're currently working with them to help figure out the logistics behind that, leveraging technology, right? So I think that's something that was really cool. The other thing I would say really quickly as a takeaway is I would encourage every customer to look at some sort of managed service provider, even if it's not Aspire, but look at some sort of managed service provider to alleviate the burden off of your internal IT staff when things like this happen. Right. And also when we talk about security, think about security not only in terms of the technology or the tools, but think about the people behind it. Think about the people analyzing the data, correlating the data, making sure you're not getting false positives and things of that nature. So think about the investments in the people as well, which is where I think a managed service provider comes into play as well.
Thank you, Tolu. Chandler, I'm going to toss this to you, and I noticed that our Boston team all has pocket squares. That's a nice touch, gentlemen. Really. So IT director or some activity or action that took place that Chandler blew your mind.
Yeah, I think to Robert's point, technology is nothing without people. If we don't consider the human behind everything that this enables, then it's all for naught, right? That's the best part that I love about being alive, is getting to interact with other people, hearing new experiences, perspectives, whatever. There's a restaurant group here in Rhode Island that is community owned, community operated. It's more of a co-op type model. There's a lot of people's jobs and livelihoods at risk. And so what that team did immediately when all of this hit was move to a singular operated order, like takeout based system to keep those jobs alive. They started a fund to enable the front of house staff that doesn't necessarily participate in that action, so they could still be taken care of while we not wait this out, but while we work through this and figure out what it looks like. And the community just responded in kind, because it is predicated on those relationships and those people and those experiences. That nothing disrupted greater to the service industry than people not going through the door, and this still enabled that in some form or fashion. And I'm floored by it. And all those restaurants cook amazing food, so I've been eating very well.
Thank you. And lastly, I will toss the last response over to Aspire's own Ryan Seacrest. Josh, you've done an amazing job with these tech series. Truthfully, though,
I think it's been exceptional to have you here. You've really taken up the mantle. This is fantastic.
I would have said Dunkelman.
We just have a few minutes left, so I want to make sure that we thank everybody for their time here today and joining us in this conversation. Seeing the organizations that seem to have survived this well had already planned or been aware of what their digital transformation and journey will look like. So they laid some of the groundwork and worked with organizations such as Aspire in order to have the engineering moments and strategies in place along with the right people. So we're seeing less disruption. And again, I'm not going to name out any names right now, but Tolu mentioned one of his educational institutions. We have one here in the Boston area that we've done a lot of groundwork around, frankly, video and online learning. And they have not really to do the appropriate delivery without having the human contact necessarily. So I would encourage anybody out there to take something from everybody here, whether it is considering what your physical infrastructure looks like and how we kind of flip that, whether it is making more consideration for security, not just as that I like Chicken Little, not just as the Chicken Little moment. Make the consideration around what happens if my technical staff be at work. What if they're all infected because we didn't do the green team, purple team, orange team situation? Who can I partner with to make sure that the rest of my workers can work? Also, to of course consider getting access to the best secure conferencing tools that you can find. Those are all, I think, ways that organizations have found their ability to continue operations through this.
Yeah, and Josh, I think Robert, hit a chord earlier. We personalize, right? All of this conversation brings us to a place where we can personalize solutions to make your businesses work, whatever they may be, public sector, K-12, higher ed, commercial, it doesn't matter. And if you are interested, and if this conversation spoke to you and you're interested in taking this farther, please email sales@Aspire. Again, that's sales@Aspire. We are happy to have some conversation and see if we can help you. And again, you will have access to all the talent that is here on this panel. Gentlemen, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. To all of our audience participants, thank you for joining. And we look forward to conversations in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
It was fun.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you for joining the Aspire Technology Partners TechCast. For more information about us, please visit www.aspiretransforms.com or call 732-847-9600 to speak to one of our experts. For Aspire Technology Partners, this is Josh Dolby.